magic ends here. No sorcery shall claim me. What magic is this?
Many new players struggle to handle Mesmers because of how much information and how quickly you have to process it to deal with a Mesmer. When it is a meta pick in Guild Wars 2 PvP, it's not a good time. While Mesmer can be a lot of fun to play, it is by design one of the least fun classes to play against. However, their magic tricks have a very clear design, and learning how they work will help to dispel the illusion. The core mechanic of Mesmers is Shatters and Illusions. All of the weapon skills that Mesmers have will create one of two types of illusions. Either they will make clones or phantasms. Clones usually do no damage, but can apply conditions and get in the way. Phantasms are illusions that do a very strong attack and then become a clone afterwards. If a phantasm is interrupted by a CC before it completes its attack, it will convert into a clone immediately. Illusions will generally focus on the target that the skills that generated them were cast on. There are a few exceptions of skills that will retarget clones, but for the most part, clones can be very predictable because of this. Clones can be shattered for a stronger spell effect. When shattered, a clone will walk towards its target very deliberately. You can see this because some clones are ranged and can cast their small attacks from further away, but will still get closer than they need to. There are 4 different shatters Mesmers can perform. Their effect will be more powerful the more clones they have, so when you see a lot of clones up, you want to prepare for a large attack. Mesmers also have an illusionary persona, which means you shouldn't trust what they say, ever. But also they have themselves to count as a clone when shattering, so they can shatter without any clones basically. Mind Rack is their power burst shatter. It only does damage, but it does a lot of it. Then there is Cry of Frustration, which gives out a confusion the more clones that hit. When dealing with Mesmers who put out a lot of confusion, you really need to think about when and which skills to use. Prefer to use high value skills that don't require multiple casts, because each cast you use while in confusion will tax you of health. Try not to use any skills when you have 5 or more stacks of confusion on you, and ration your abilities out very precisely and carefully if you must. Diversion is also a very powerful shatter. This turns every clone into a daze, and because of clone positioning, these dazes may occur at different times, essentially creating a very long duration daze if positioned correctly. When shattered, clones walk toward their target and explode and do their effect when they reach their target. When you see clones walking towards you, you should dodge towards those clones, because if you dodge backwards, you may dodge one of them but get further away from the others and stagger their effects. You want to position yourself in a way that you can dodge through multiple clones at once. Because of illusionary persona, diversion can also be used as a reactive interrupt if the Mesmer is in melee range, so they often can get kills on most classes that have a heal skill just by saving their diversion to interrupt the heal. Make sure you aren't near any clones or aren't in line of sight if you want to land your heal skill. The last core Mesmer shatter is Distortion, which will instantly destroy all clones, and for each clone destroyed, give them 1 second of invulnerability. They are free to do anything while distorting except for capture objectives. Since you can't interact with them, they will try to play aggressively during distortion, so you want to just survive and take as little pressure as possible during this. Since they can't capture objectives, you can easily kite this because you aren't forced to contest the objective and can use positioning more freely. Chronomancers have no distortion, which means they're much more susceptible to focus. However, they gain Continuum Rift, which allows them to go back in time and reset cooldowns. Just like any other Shatters, its effect will increase for each clone they have, making the duration longer. While in Continuum Shift, which you can see by the rift they leave behind, and this can even be seen if they try to burst you from stealth, they will be able to go where they please and cast whatever skills they want, but once the Continuum Shift ends, they will return back to the rift location and any skills or health they lost will be restored. They will, however, keep all conditions and CC that they gain during it. Obviously, a Mesmer will want to spam out a bunch of high impact skills during Continuum Shift, so you'll want to be playing very passively since most of what you do to them won't matter. But if you are on the offensive, you can still put conditions on them which will stick to them afterwards. Dazing Mesmers during Continuum Shift is also very good because they can't spam all their massive spells and their rift will run out soon, so they can't afford to wait out the days or interrupt cooldown. You can also kill the Continuum Rift, which will end it prematurely. But in general, this is hard to do because a Mesmer will freely cast on you if you don't focus them. And it doesn't last long enough to waste much to do so. You can, however, know that they will return to the rift location once it is finished, so if you see the rift and they are kiting you, just stand at the rift location and they will return right back to you. Mesmers get most of their clone generation from their weapon skills, so knowing how Mesmers get their clones is very much about knowing which weapons they're using and how to counterplay those specific skills, because if a Mesmer can't use those skills, then they can't get clones, and then they can't use Shatters, and that's most of their class mechanic right there. If you blind a Mesmer as they're casting a Phantasm, the Phantasm will just not spawn, which means that the clone also won't spawn. Also, you can line of sight a Phantasm while they're casting it on you, and it will have the same effect where it doesn't cast. So let's go over the main weapon that most Mesmers will use, and that is the sword. Sword is probably the strongest weapon, and it's used on both power and Condi builds. The auto attack just removes boons on the third strike, but they don't really get much else, so they're very vulnerable if they're just auto attacking, so you want to counter pressure a Mesmer that's just auto attacking with sword. Then they have Blurred Frenzy. This will root them in place and do an evade, and while they're evading they'll also do damage towards the target. You want to just basically not interact with the Mesmer while they're doing this because they're doing damage to you and they're also evading, so you can't really do much. But if you have Shocking Aura, you can actually get hit by their Blurred Frenzy and you will interrupt it. Then they have Illusionary Leap, so this is their clone generation skill, and it will put a clone on their target in a kind of short range, and then within 3 seconds they can port and swap with their clone. So if the clone is on top of the target, it will immobilize the target. If the clone isn't on top of the target, then you'll just swap with the clones. And you can use this for a lot of jukes and repositioning to kind of like, say for example, this golem is chasing me and they're moving, but the clone is trying to be on top of them. So the clone might be like behind the golem if the golem is chasing me. So I could put it out, and you have 3 seconds, and then you can port, and it's a really just good utility skill. You can use it to get up ledges. 3 seconds after they use their Illusionary Leap, they can use the port on you. So you want to avoid being immobilized when you see that Illusionary Leap. So what you want to do is you want to get out of range of the sword clone, because the sword clone is what immobilizes you when it ports between you and it. Then you have the Focus. Focus gets a Phantasm. So a Phantasm is a strong effect, and this will create a projectile blocking effect to this kind of like whirl, and then it'll turn it into the clone that you're using in your main hand, because there are no focus clones. There's only main hand clones or two-handed clones. And they also have Temporal Curtain, and Temporal Curtain is very dangerous because when you see this, they can at any time decide to pull enemies in towards that, and you can be sucked into like a huge combo. So when you see the Temporal Curtain, You want to wait a second because they can't use the pull immediately. Wait a second while you're getting out of range of it and then dodge away. The range of the pull is pretty large, but if you get out of range of it, then you won't be able to get pulled by it. Then you have the Scepter, which will create clones on the auto attack, the third hit of the auto chain. And there is the Scepter 2, which will create a clone as well. So there's a lot of clone generation on Scepter, and for them to get the clone generation, you have to hit into their block. There's also the Offhand Sword, which gives a illusionary riposte, which is similar to the Scepter block. It will do a power attack instead of a condition attack, though, if you counterattack, and it will also create a clone. So you don't want to be hitting into that buff. Then there is the Staff. Staff is a very strong dueling weapon because it has so much survivability to it and ways to disrupt enemies. So the Staff 2 is a port backwards, which will create a clone. So anyone that's using a projectile that can be blocked will need to position themselves around the clone after they do this. The Phantasm on the Staff will shoot a line towards the target and give a lot of vulnerability. This can basically be avoided by line of sighting because it is such a long duration attack that you can't just dodge it all. And they have Chaos Armor. When they use this, you'll see a purple aura around them, and that will give them protection or regen or swiftness when you hit them, and it will also give the person who hit them either weakness or confusion or cripple. So it makes them very survivable to have Chaos Armor, and there are a lot of ways just then using Chaos Armor to get it. So if they use a Chaos Field and they leap through it, so if I am a staff wielding Mesmer, I can use Chaos Storm, and then if I have a leap through it, I can get a Chaos Aura like that, and that'll give me more of that and more defense. So you really don't want to be hitting them when they have Chaos Aura. The Staff Mesmer is going to have quite a bit of it. Also, the Chaos Storm itself will daze whenever they cast it, and it will give more boons and more conditions to enemies inside of it randomly. So Chill, Poison, and Weakness are all very strong conditions in the Chaos Storm, and it'll give Pulsing, Aegis, Retaliation, or Swiftness to the Mesmer. So it's just so strong. You don't want to be standing in the Chaos Storm ever. There's also the Torch, which will give them Stealth. You'll see this poof, and even if they're already in stealth, then you'll see that animation. So if they try to like do a multiple stealth stack, you can see them actually use this in stealth, and it gives you a pretty big clue that you're going to get stealth bursted. And you also know that 3 seconds after they go into stealth, there will be a secondary burst. So usually you get blinded in melee, and then 3 seconds later it will be like this burning attack, which actually has a really long duration of burning if you have the torch trait and if you're like a Condi Mesmer. So 3 seconds after, you're usually going to want to dodge if they use the torch 4. Also, you want to watch out for the Phantasmal Mage, because it does this frontal cone ability, which does a lot of power damage and has really long duration of burning and confusion. So how you want to play around the Phantasmal Mage is, as soon as you see the mage spawn, you want to just run behind it, because it's going to do that frontal cone, but it takes a little bit of a while to do it, and as soon as they get in range of you, it'll do it. So you just wait till it's about to cast it, and then go behind it, and then it'll shoot the cone in front of them, and you'll be behind it. Chronomancers can use shields, which have very powerful effects. The Echo of Memory is a block, and if anything hits them while they're using that block, they will be able to use a secondary Echo of Memory. So they've got 2 blocks if you proc them, so you really don't want to hit them when they're blocking because they'll get more. And also, the target will be attacked by a Phantasm, which will slow and give protection to nearby allies. You can actually prevent the Echo of Memory from spawning if you dodge at the end of the block animation. So that'll prevent them from spawning a phantasm, but if you hit them, then they can just use it again and potentially spawn another. So what you want to do is not only avoid hitting them while they're using the block, but also dodge at the very end of the animation so that that doesn't spawn. Then there's Tides of Time. You just want to basically not get hit by this. It goes out and then it goes in, and it'll stun you in both directions. Chronomancers can also take the Chronophantasma trait, which is usually better with condition builds, but it will make their phantasms happen twice. So if I cast the Torch Phantasm once, it will cast it, and then the second one will come right after, and because conditions are not affected by the 50% reduction in damage from the phantasms, it'll basically do twice the damage if it hits twice. So you want to watch out for the Pistol Phantasm and the Torch Phantasm because those can do a lot of damage when used with Chronophantasma. Mirages will create clones from their axes, which do like this whirl effect, and it'll leave a clone behind them. They can also retarget which target their clones are on by using their Axe 3. And this will place all their axes on the target and then give a lot of confusion to that target. So you want to avoid that usually, and this will also break targeting, which means that if you're targeting them, then you'll be detargeting. So it's kind of like a 0.1 second stealth in a way, because you never stop seeing them, but you lose targeting. Mirages also have ambush attacks. Whenever they use their single dodge, they will now have a new auto attack. So they'll dodge, and then for like a second they can use their ambush. And this will make a powerful attack that can do a lot of damage or give them a lot of utility. And when they are traded for Infinite Horizon, their clones will also use ambushes. So they can use their dodge, and then their clone will give conditions as well as them with the Scepter clone. And then with the sword, if they use a dodge, they can use a high power damaging attack, which will daze for a very short amount of time, but it's a very high interrupting spec, because if your clones are doing that as well, they will daze and interrupt as well as you. So there's a lot of interrupt on the sword, and it gives them a lot of mobility because they have a leap now. So that's really strong. Mirages also have a very important mechanic that you have to understand. Their dodge is not a regular dodge. Their dodge is no animations. So normally when you dodge, you have this sort of like roll animation. When a Mirage dodges, they do nothing. But what that means is that they can dodge while doing other things. So you never really know when a Mirage is going to dodge, because they can use it to cover, say, their heal skill. So they can dodge while healing, which for other classes would interrupt their heal. So Mirages have a very powerful dodge because it allows them to have no animation, so they can layer all of their stuff onto one animation and be dodging during it. And then they also have a lot of ambushes that are sort of like linearly placed after their dodges. And one thing that you have to remember is that their dodge is only 3 8/4 seconds like every other dodge. So you can interrupt their ambush skills if you wait until the Mirage Cloak buff goes away. And because of this, Mirages only have one dodge. So if you see them use a dodge like this, then they generally are going to not have one for a couple more seconds. There are, however, many other ways to get a evade, which can give them Mirage Cloak. So not always are they going to be out of evades, even though they're out of dodges. One example is the Desert Distortion trait. So whenever they gain Distortion, they will gain Mirage Cloak essentially, and they can use ambushes like that. They can also pick up these little shiny purple crystals, which will give them the same effect as Mirage Cloak. And they can get those from their heal skill, or they can get it from using Distortion. So whenever they use Distortion with the Desert Distortion trait, their clones will become crystals, and then they can go pick up those crystals. You can see those crystals, but you don't want to go near them because you will get weakened if they pick them up near you. So you do want to be careful of the amount of evades that they have and how they can get them. So if they just use distortion, that means that they can use their crystals if they're traded into desert distortion, and then they can pick these up and do a bunch of ambushes, which makes them very powerful when they use their distortion. So what you want to do is play very aggressively until they use their distortion, and then you want to back off because they have a lot of sustain to follow through with the counter pressure once they do use distortion. And of course, if you want to prevent their infinite horizons from being as powerful, you want to start killing off their clones. Like Guardians, Mesmers can have a lot of reflect, especially if they go into the Warden's Feedback Inspiration trait, where all of their focus skills will become reflex instead of blocking those projectiles. They also have their Mirror Heal can also give them a buff that looks like this, and that will mean that they have an aura of projectile reflection. They can also get that aura from dueling if they go into Evasive Mirror, which gives them the mirror buff whenever they evade an attack every 10 seconds. And then there's obviously feedback, which they can get from the utility or from the inspiration trait that will create a feedback when they start rezzing someone. Domination Mesmers will have a lot of Boon Rip and ability to interrupt, with Daze giving them a lot of vulnerability and burst damage when they have vulnerability on the target. So if you have a lot of vulnerability on you, you want to be cleansing that versus Domination Mesmers because they get a lot more damage. And also they'll have Power Block, which if they interrupt you, they will make that skill have a longer interrupt cooldown. So usually it's a 4-second, now it's 15 seconds. So that's, you really want to be careful around Mesmers that might be running Power Block. Not all of them do. Some of them run more Boon Rip, which is better versus removing the sustain of tankier classes. And you can tell when someone is running Domination because they'll usually have Bountiful Blades, and that is for like a greatsword, and their Phantasm, when using the greatsword, will have 2 Phantasms, and that means they're 100% Domination. Mesmers can go into the Chaos trait line to get Master of Manipulation, which makes their manipulation utilities stronger, but a lot of them use manipulations anyways, even if they're not in the Chaos trait line. And they can get Arcane Thievery, which is really good for 1v1s because it transfers boons and conditions from or to the target and gives them slow and gives the Mesmer quickness. So it's just a really hard, like, I destroy you if they use Arcane Thievery on them. And you can see sort of like this animation where they lift their arm. If you get Arcane Thievery, it's a 20-second cooldown with the manipulation trait, but if you get hit by it, it's a pretty hard change in momentum. So you really want to avoid that if possible, but it's unblockable, so you really need to evade it. Then there is Blink. Blink is one of the best utilities in the game because it is such a long range. It's 1200 range, and it's a stun break. Then there is Mass Invisibility. You see this, it will pulse outwards to 1200 radius and give stealth to all nearby allies. And if you see that pulse and then everyone disappears, they're still there, they're just in stealth, and that means that you are in danger. In Inspiration, they can get a lot of Condition Cleanse, but also there is the Blurred Inscriptions trait, which makes all of the signets have improved effects and grant distortion whenever they finish casting them. So each signet that they use can be very strong. The Signet of the Ether will recharge all of their Phantasm skills by 50%, so they can use a Phantasm, use their heal, and then recharge their Phantasm, so they can spam a lot of that. Basically, you want to be interrupting Signet of the Ether if you can, because it gives them distortion afterwards, not during it. But if they're a Mirage, they can be dodging during Signet of the Ether. With Signet of Midnight and Blurred Inscriptions, they gain 5 Condi Cleanse, Distort, Stealth, Stun Break, and Blind nearby enemies. It's a very strong oh shit button. If they use this, they're pretty safe for a while because they've cleansed all those conditions. So you want to try to bait this out before you try to really commit for the kill if they're using it. And you can see that they have Signet of Midnight on their bar. That's the thing about Signets. You can see that they have a cooldown ready because they have the passive. And then Signet of Illusions will recharge all of their shatter skills. So if they use all their shatters and then they use Signet of Illusions, well, you don't know that they have those cooldowns because they have them all back. So yeah, they can get a lot of distortion from this, and also just the fact that they're getting distortion if they're running blurred inscriptions means that they can be having a lot of synergy with the Desert Distortion trait, because distortions will enable Mirage ambushes. And then finally you have Signet of Humility. There are other signets that you can use, but this is the only one you really need to watch out for, because it will turn the target into a MOA. So you polymorph them, and it has this very obvious animation. You'll see the little MOA signet above them, and it's a really flashy animation. Then they turn into a MOA. If you get turned into a MOA, you want to use the 5 skill, which is an evade and a rush forwards, and then you want to use the 2 skill, which will leap you in a direction. And you want to just stay alive as long as you can, and you can dodge while you're a MOA, but you cannot jump. You gotta be careful about that. You'll also want to watch out for the Phantasmal Disenchanter, because what this does is a very subtle animation, and it will remove 5 boons and deal a lot of damage if you don't have boons. So if you see the Disenchanter, you really want to avoid that small little bolt it's going to shoot at you. Then there's Portal. Portal is one of the more difficult things to play around. So what a Mesmer will do is they'll place down the portal, and then 30 seconds after they can decide whether they want to port back or to get a lower cooldown on placing their next portal location. If they do decide to port back from a 5,000 range, then there will be a portal putting them between 2 places. You can't really play around this because they can just keep porting back and forth, and you never really know which one they decide to go through. You really want to just kind of be in between their 2 portal locations, or you can have one person stay behind and one person chase to basically force the Mesmer to decide which one and fight either one. You do want to watch out for Mantra Mesmers as well. They'll usually use the Mantra of Distraction, and they'll charge up the Mantra. If you see them casting that, you really want to interrupt that. And if they get it off, then they have 2 charges where they can daze their target from range if they're facing it. And that can, if they're traded into domination, do a lot of damage because they can interrupt you, which can power block, and they can also put vulnerability on you. And that can be used in the middle of their burst combos to give them a lot more damage. And you can just smell that disgusting Mantra Mesmer from a mile away, or hear them if you hear this. Thief is the hardest counter to Mesmer because Mesmers survive by reacting to things that come at them faster with their many instant casts and evades. Mesmers can't, however, see a thief coming up on them if they're in stealth, which makes it hard to predict, and prediction is where Mesmers gain most of their control. Also, thieves are just faster, so Mesmers struggle to escape. Guardians lose a lot of their sustain to the boon rip of Mesmers, and their Aegis doesn't do well against the many hits that Mesmers do with their clones. Also, Guardians are slow and can't catch up to Mesmers. Elementalists don't particularly like any version of Mesmer. Either Confusion Mesmers counter their spammy playstyle, or Power Burst Mesmers lock them down. Mesmers can kite Necromancers through their Shroud and have the burst and interrupt potential to really lock down a Necromancer when they leave Shroud. Revenants are also like slower, more telegraphed thieves, which is pretty much the advantage that Thief has over Mesmer. so Revenant has almost no advantages against the Mesmer, making them suffer when a Mesmer is focusing them. Engineers don't particularly deal with Mesmers well because of the amount of interrupts that set them back in their skill flow. But Engineers don't get kited as easily because of their range damage and ability to kill clones quickly. It may look like a lot of these classes are getting countered by Mesmer means that Mesmer is overpowered, but that's not really the case. It's more so because Mesmer is very good when it can put itself in the right situation, but it's a lot harder to put yourself in the right situation as a Mesmer because you're not the high mobility thief, but you're also not the high sustain warrior that can just survive any situation that it doesn't have a favorable matchup in. If a Mesmer is in an unfavorable situation and it doesn't have control over that situation, it just dies instantly. One of the major factors in fighting around Mesmers is discerning between clones and the player. Because the clones have your name and they have your title and guild tag, they look like you, but there are some things that you can differentiate between them using. First of all, you want to be tabbing through and looking at the buffs on those clones. If you see one has a signet buff, that means that the Mesmer is the real one, because clones can't have signets. Clones just spam their auto attack. Now, if the player moves around or behaves like a clone, it can be hard to tell. But usually, clones do not dodge. Now, if you're a Mirage, you can make your clones dodge, and that can make it very hard to discern which is the real one. But their movement is also really important. So a clone will never backpedal, it will never sidestep, it will only walk forwards toward the target. So you can see just by the behavior of clones which one is the real one. And obviously the clones will only do one attack. So a Phantasm will do one attack and then it'll turn into a clone, and then the clones will only use like an auto attack and then do it very passively, not very aggressively. So if you see this Mesmer is casting the auto attack a little bit faster. So in a lot of ways, if a Mesmer is trying to optimize the way that they play, they'll be playing in a non-bot like manner, and you can tell the difference. Now if the player is actually, very bot like, well then there's other issues that are going to be present there. You can also see a buff when a Mesmer creates a clone if they're running the Illusions trait line, Compounding Power. So if they're running Illusions, you know 100% that you can always tell which one is the real one, because if you're trying to discern between a clone and a real one, that means they've created a clone, which means they'll have that buff. Another way to tell is the amount of boons on them. Mesmers will usually gain a little bit of boons, and their clones may gain some from some traits, but they'll usually have more, so you can take a guess by which one has the most boons. It makes it harder for you to find out which one is real because you actually do have to target each one individually and see which one has buffs. And sometimes they won't give themselves any buffs, so it'll be really hard to figure out which one is real. In this case, you do want to just cleave out each and every single clone, and you can tell which one is real as soon as you start hitting it, because clones have very low HP pools, and a real Mesmer will have a much larger HP pool. So you'll see when you start hitting it, the relative health pool that they're losing, and if it's a real Mesmer, then you'll notice that it's not going down that fast. And even if you do know which is the real Mesmer, clones can be an issue to deal with because of the shatters that they perform, and if they're a Mirage, the effects of the ambushes. So one way you want to kill out all the clones, even though they might be spread out, is by going behind line of sight. And when clones don't have line of sight, they automatically go the shortest path to get to a line of sight spot to attack you again. And usually this balls up all of the clones in AI, and then you can kill them all by using a small AoE and hitting them all at the same time. So to sum up, you want to prevent them from getting clones by blinding their phantasms or line of sighting them as they're about to cast them, And then when they do have clones up, you want to kill their clones by abusing the AI, figuring out which one is real as soon as possible, and being very aggressive on them when they don't have clones. So if you like this kind of video, give it a like and subscribe, and check out the other matchups in the playlist down below, and I will see you guys next time.